Hey everybody, this is Alex Merced from alexmercedcoder.com and welcome to the Web Development 101 podcast. And in the last episode, I did the first interview ever we did for this podcast with Dan Behrman where we talked about web development, PHP, all that stuff. Here I have another compadre from the Libertarian Party, Spike Cohen, to talk. Recently retired from web development, but I would love to hear about how you started your business, how, just a little bit, tell us a little bit about your life in web development.
Sure. Also, thanks for having me on, and thanks for listening, folks. My name is Spike Cohen. I started a web design company in 1998. I was had just turned 16, and I actually sold off my company back in 2017. So I was in business for almost 20 years, and I started it. It was just me with a computer and some software, and started with a text editor, and eventually moved my way up to Dreamweaver, and really started as a bootstrap business from the very scratch into a full fledged company. By the time I was selling it, I wasn't really doing. I was basically doing the selling of it, and had people that I was outsourcing to at that point. And so yeah, so I grew it from scratch, and certainly have quite a bit of input on that process of upscaling.
Got it in 1998. So this is like I think when the Netscape browser was still a thing at that point.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So
There
those
was
are
no. I don't believe there was even a Chrome by then. I think it was just like Internet Explorer and Netscape Navigator, um, and I guess Safari for Mac. Those were pretty much what everyone used.
got it. And what was like your so was most of those early websites were they mostly just like static pages? Were you doing a lot of JavaScript on those pages? And how were like those early JavaScript days? Because I think if I remember right, JavaScript was created in 1996. So that's really like early days of JavaScript.
Yeah, and the vast majority of what I was doing had little to no
Mm-hmm.
JavaScript, honestly. It was I was doing small business pages for local
Mm-hmm.
businesses in the Myrtle Beach area, and there wasn't a tremendous amount of need for that,
Mm-hmm.
for what I was doing. And if there was, there was usually an already available JavaScript solution, an easy script that could be dropped in. So I did do some JavaScripting, but it really wasn't. I was mostly doing static page, like stuff that would be embarrassing now, but it was cutting edge at the time.
Mm-hmm.
Static HTML, with inline style sheets. Like, I mean, like an old school, what you would learn to make, I guess, in like probably middle school now, or high school or something. But yeah, no, it was like I said, I started with a text editor, and I ended up finding some kind of open source third party text editor that had the color coding, so it wasn't all just black on white. And I mean, this was elementary stuff. So yeah, no, it was the beginning of it. What got me into it was that when I was in my teens, I was finishing up because I was homeschooled. I was finishing up with school, and my parents basically said to me, "Listen, you can start a business or you can go to college, but you have to do something." And I already had determined from doing some summers landscaping, and doing like working at as a busboy and stuff at restaurants, and being a cart return person, that kind of stuff, like doing kind of, I guess, menial labor stuff, that I was like, I definitely don't want to do that outside of my teens, but I did not want to go to college. So I thought, well, what's a business I can start where I don't have to get any kind of degree to do it, and I don't have to get any kind of special licensing other than a business license to do it, and I can really just learn how to do it and get straight to work. And web design was kind of the first thing that popped into my lap, so that's what got me into it.
Very nice. Very cool. And basically, how did the demands of your clients evolve over time? Like from the day you started, from the day you sold it. Like, well, how did things sort of change and grow in scope? I guess.
Oh wow! So I mean, you have to remember. So 1998, my biggest challenge for the first, man, probably at least 3 years, if not 4 or 5 years, was that most businesses didn't think they needed one, any kind of presence at all on the internet. Now we've gone to the other extreme where people aren't sure if they need a website because they have their social media presence. This was, I don't need a website. I've got a full page ad in the yellow pages. Like, it was a completely different mentality. I feel like I'm dating myself so much by talking like this, because I feel like I'm someone saying back when I was your age, I walked uphill both ways and all, but it really was. I actually, the first year that I did it, I didn't charge anyone. I would just go and say, I'm making these things called websites that people can find out about your business by going on the computer and going on the internet. And, I'm making them for free to build up my portfolio. And even then I'd have people go, I don't know. I don't think I need one of those. So, I mean, that was honestly the biggest challenge. The demand at the time of the clients, honestly, there was almost no demand from them other than they weren't really sure what they were even getting into. By the time after a year that I started charging, by getting into 99, 2000, people were understanding that the internet was a legit thing. It wasn't, Paul Krugman was wrong. It wasn't going to go away like the fax machine. And because of that, they started realizing that it was an actual tool. But so many of them thought it was basically just something that could be referenced from their other advertising, so that they would just direct people to that from their billboard ad or their, park bench laminated ad or their, radio ad or TV ad or whatever, that it would direct it to them and it would have some informational stuff. What I was trying to explain to them was that more and more people were using something called a search engine, where you could actually search for stuff and find exactly what you were looking for. And because it was hard for them to conceptualize that, that was a hard sell to get them to say, I'm not just making you this static thing, but I'm also making it so people can find you on the internet without already knowing your address, your domain name. And so, over time, the demands and needs became more sophisticated as the clients actually even knew what the internet was and what the usefulness of it was. And towards the end, it reached a point where I was having people basically doing a la carte stuff, where they were saying, listen, I need this, 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 and this. Especially once social media was in place, it became very much that, as opposed to in the beginning, it was very much I was explaining to them why they needed stuff. And there were always some clients that were still like that all the way to the end, but towards the end, it became more that they knew what they wanted, and obviously the needs were much greater. So I did everything from restaurants to real estate companies to home watch companies to property management companies to hotels to car parts suppliers and everything in between. So e-commerce solutions. I did a couple sites for singers. So I'm kind of all over the place, but the demands became more sophisticated over time, obviously, especially those last few years when social media was a really big thing. And also not just the demands, but the already existing education that the clients had before I even talked to them, of knowing A, what they needed, and B, what that would even look like. So it definitely changed over time, though.
Awesome. And back in those early days, so basically, like, was it like search engines like Excite and Alta Vista? And what were you using for like hosting? Was it like, were you hosting them like GeoCities AngelFire, or were you using some other particular host? Um, I don't know, just bring back a lot of memories.
Yeah, no, it's even trying to. It's funny because people ask me this stuff and I'll think, oh man, how did I even do that? So I forget the name of the hosting company, but it was a third party hosting
Hmm.
company that I used. I want to say it was called. It wasn't VDS. It's V something. Anyway, I
Hmm.
used them for the first few years. Then I switched to a company called Lunar Pages. Towards the end, I was just setting clients up with their own GoDaddy or Bluehost
Hmm.
accounts or something like that, because it was easier just to have it on their side rather than the difference in pricing wasn't as broad as it used to be. Back when they used to kill you on hosting charges. Um, but yeah, so I'm sorry, I forgot the rest of your question besides the hosting.
Oh no, that was basically it. Like on but on that note, like, well, one, I have to say, if you're a company that has invested in your online presence, that really paid off this year. um, but
Oh yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
because you can't exist without an internet presence at the moment. But on that, like, for people who are getting into this industry now, especially since a lot more people are looking to get into this industry now because of the nature
Mhm.
of today's environment, like, what advice would you give to them?
It's really the same advice I would give to anyone in any startup industry and any starting up of a business. You have to differentiate yourself from others, whether it's in your marketing or in your approach or in your pricing or whatever. You have to be different than everyone else, because if you think of how, when you're searching for whatever services or goods that you need, you're naturally drawn to the things that stand out. Often it's pricing related. And this is something that I didn't want to hear initially, and a lot of people don't want to hear. It doesn't hurt to build your portfolio, even if it means slashing your pricing. Like I said, I didn't make a dollar on web design for the first year that I was doing it because that's I was now I was also a kid, but at the end of the day, it was still the same thing. I was bootstrapping a company from nothing. So if you were truly getting into this from scratch, you may want to consider, if not free, then severely, severely discounting it just to build up a portfolio. Having a portfolio is so important for this because people are often, depending on what your pay structure is, they're giving you money without really knowing who you are or what you're about. Having that thing to look at that you've done all these different things, especially if you've made sites in their type of industry, then that's gold. So I would encourage you to be I'm not telling you that your business isn't worth charging a fair market value for. I'm telling you that in order to be able to charge that amount, you have to stick out from others, and that may mean having to swallow your pride a little on pricing, at least for the first year or two or something, until you can get started up. Um, Always stay educated on and again, this is for really any kind of business. Always stay educated on what the newest thing is. So I was one of the first companies that was offering mobile responsive websites back when that was. I mean, this would have been 2010 or 2011. People hadn't even heard of this thing, but I saw that this was going to be the future. When I first got my BlackBerry and realized that most people were going to be using, it didn't look like this, but most people were going to be using one of these to go on the internet, especially like older people that aren't going to bother getting a computer, but someone gets them a phone and now they can be on the internet, that was going to completely change everything. And so I started very early on mobile responsive web design, so that by the time that became the standard, I was already well into that. So look for the trends, look for the newest stuff, learn about it, become good at it, and offer it. And again, until you have a portfolio and a steady stream of stuff coming in, you may have to be a little bit more flexible with your pricing than you would like. And I say that as someone who was not a fan of doing that. But again, the idea is to build it up so that eventually you don't have to charge a discount. You can charge, the premium value because you're the hot ticket.
Awesome. Thank you very much. And thank you very much for coming on the show. Is there any links you'd like to plug or anything you'd like to plug before we wrap up?
Well, I've been out of business for 3 years, so not so much. I'm now campaigning for vice president, which is completely irrelevant to this. But if you want to go to Spike 2020, you can check it out. But no, oh, and my shows. I do two shows. Again, nothing to do with web design. But if you go to muddiedwatersmedia.com, you can see my shows, My Fellow Americans and The Muddied Waters of Freedom. And that's it. Yeah, I'm out of business, so I don't. there's no web design stuff anymore. I decided to pivot into libertarian messaging, the profitable world of libertarian messaging.
Awesome. Thank you very much for coming on the show. It was a delight, and wish you the best.
Thank you guys for listening.